Alright guys, welcome back to the video. So it is that time of the year again. It's cold and so it is building season. Yes, we're in California, and when I say cold, I don't mean like Midwest cold. I mean California cold. It's 40s or 50s a day, breezy, kind of drizzly. So anyways, it's building season here. Of course, we gotta get the TV going. So we're starting out on this airplane, which is, as you probably know, the Hangar 9 MB-339. This is the version 2, obviously. A couple of changes on this airplane. It is fully sheeted now. The original one had some open framework on some flight controls and stuff like that. This is fully sheeted now, and it's got this vinyl covering, which is pre-detailed, which is super, super cool. In my opinion, this looks so much better than the original sport iron-on film scheme. This just feels more legit, I guess is the way you would say that. But it's, got panel lines, and it's pretty well, accurately done. I would love to come in here and like repaint and kind of modify the cockpit to be more realistic, but we'll get to that some other time. For right now, I'm going to assemble this thing per the manual. Crazy, I know. Pretty much zero modifications to this model. So I've kind of laid everything out so you guys can see what's going to go into this. Super simple. Really, it's just a matter of hinging all the flight controls, setting up, installing servos, push rods, and installing the turbine. Landing gear are electric, so that makes it super easy. I do have a few things like easy connectors for the wings, and a couple of other little things that I'm going to add to the model, but essentially it's going to be built per the manual. So one thing we are doing is we're going to be using the Kingtech 102. Now I know you see that says 86 is the biggest motor you can do, but the 102 is essentially the same size as the 86. So the T38 has 86s in it. Oh, excuse me. And but the 86s are hardly any smaller than this, and I think just a few ounces lighter. So this is essentially within the size range of the model, and having a little extra push would be great. On the version 1 that we had a Swimwind 80. So, and some say that the Swimwind 80s are more like a 70 or a 75 thrust turbine, which would put it around 17 pounds of thrust. I believe this is 21 and some change. So we're going to have 3 or 4 pounds more thrust, which is awesome. Not that the original one we had was underpowered, but having a little more push for the vertical maneuvers would be great. I don't even want the model to be faster. Just having some better vertical power would be great. And then also, if we change airframes at some point and this turbine's still kicking and alive, this will be better for other airframe options. So this model is a good size. It's funny because when we were at Scale Masters and Max Huerta had his MB-339 there, it's funny how small this model looks when there's other big airplanes around, but it is a really nice size airplane. I think it's 84-inch wingspan or 85-inch wingspan. Might even be 86 with the tanks. It's a good size model. So all balsa construction, in case you weren't aware. But anyways, yeah, so we're going to start the assembly on this thing. They package everything very nicely. These are separated into flight controls. So these are elevators. Sorry, this is the rudder, elevators, ailerons, the flaps, landing gear hardware. We got fuel tank hardware. Then of course we have the landing gear and brake controller. This is a little heat protector for the back of the airplane. The pipe is already in the model. We're going to pull that back out, but I have already done a couple of things when I unboxed this airplane, and this thing's been sitting here. If you've been watching my channel, you look in the background. I've had this thing for 3 or 4 months now, just hanging up, waiting for me to get off my butt and put it together. To be fair, I was super busy getting ready for other events, but finally got to just get this knocked out because we've been really missing the version 1. We sold that to a good buddy to fund this project. So I wanted this one. As soon as I saw pictures of this airplane, I'm like, oh, we're going to need one of those because I never was a fan of the version 1 scheme, but I really enjoyed flying it, and Bentley really enjoyed flying it. So we had to get the new one, and aside from the scheme and being fully sheeted, they did some other upgrades. I know some guys were complaining about the integrity of the landing gear. They've substantially beefed up pretty much all the gear. I mean, this nose unit's insanely beefy for this size model, and the main units are beefier. The struts are a little bit different. So, and also the version 1 required some nose weight, and so having putting the nose weight to good use by making a larger nose gear was definitely a smart way to go. I still think they require a little bit of nose weight, but it's not a whole lot. So anyways, these servos we're using, these are for the wings. Got a high torque standard servo Spectrum, obviously, and then these are like a medium size servo for the tails and for the nose wheel steering. So we got all the extensions that we need. There's a whole list of parts that you can see on Horizon as far as like extensions go and servos. You know, obviously you can choose your own servos, but I've really enjoyed using the Spectrum servos in the last couple of years. They've all worked awesome. So that's what we're going to use in the airplane. And for right now, we're going to use a standard 20-channel receiver. I don't have a Synapse for this one. The original one we had a Synapse in it, and that went with the airplane. So for right now, we're going to use a 20-channel that came out of the T-38. And I considered pulling the one out of the Bearcat for now, but I'm just going to leave it in there. I don't like swapping stuff back and forth. And speaking of Bearcat, a little update on that airplane and other projects in the garage. So the Bearcat suffered a gear collapse at Skill Masters, as well as a gear up landing, which caused some damage. But I got to repair and make some new parts for the landing gear. It broke the down lock again, so that needs to get fixed, and I need a prop. Aside from that, and some cosmetic repairs on the belly, it's flyable. So that needs to get fixed, and then the next project after this is slapped together, hopefully this weekend. And I mean, I'm hoping to fly it next weekend. They go together pretty quick. So this is going to be the next project. I have the Corsair as well, but the Corsair is over here. Top. Jeez, that's loud. Every time, laundry all day long in this house. Anyways, this is a Robart all composite P47R 92-inch wingspan based on a Zeroli. And we're going to be, you probably saw this on the bench, we're going to be putting one of these motors in. I'm going to have to make my own cowling to make it fit. I bought this and I considered maybe putting FG90 in it, but I think we're going to stick with this motor for now and just make a new cowling for it. If we don't like the way it looks, we can always pull it out and try something different in the future. But the Corsair is most certainly getting one of these motors. But anyways, that's it for new projects, and we also have the Freewing Panther coming this week, so look forward to that next weekend, flying that. And yeah, let's get this thing. I'm not going to cover this for every flight control setup, but they're all basically the same minus the flaps. So I've already glued the hinges into the flight control side. Before you do that, take a little bit of oil. This is actually turbine oil in a syringe. And you put a very small amount right on the hinge point, kind of work them back and forth, work them in. That's so that way you don't, if you do get epoxy on that joint, they'll still work. So you definitely want to use a lubricant of some sort in the hinge to keep it from getting stuck with glue. So that's the first step, is to glue the hinge into the flight control side. While that's curing, I've gone ahead and sanded or scuffed the horns and the little base for the horns. I'm just using like a 60 grit pad here. You can use sandpaper or a file, I guess, but you want to scuff these so that way the glue sticks better. Otherwise you could potentially have a failure at some point with those. So, and this is going to be the same assembly process for all the flight controls, like I said, except for the flaps, which we'll cover. But essentially, glue the hinges in, install the servo, orient the servo arm so where it's centered, and I've got my little servo tester here to center the servos, and set up the push rod. Then you glue this in, obviously, get the servo in, and that's going to be how everything goes. So I'm not going to cover all of them, but just so you guys know, a little quick tip is to put oil on the hinge points before you actually glue them in. Now that we got the elevators all set up, just like the rudder, the way everything was hinged and set up, we are installing the elevators now. So first thing you gotta do is run your extensions. These are the 48-inch extensions, and there's like a tube back here. It's a conduit. It's like a cloth, probably a heat-proof conduit. You run those through there. They give you some strings out the one side. So this is the one for the rudder right here. So you pull them through. So I'm going to plug in the elevators, tape off the connector, and install the elevators, and those will be ready to go. And then we'll do the same thing with the rudder or the vertical. This actually gets glued in, so we'll get it all hooked up, test it with the servo tester, and then glue in the vertical. All right, so you can see we got the it's hard to see in there. We got the wire running across from the one side, taped to the spar so that way it doesn't melt onto the exhaust pipe, and then they run down that conduit, and then we got the vertical run. Then we just installed the heat shield here, so we'll slide the tailpipe in next, and that'll be it for the back of the airplane. I was able to use Bentley's small hands to get that tape wrapped around there and get some of this conduit stuff sorted out, because I can't get my hand in the exhaust back there. So anyways, moving along now, guys. So got the tailpipe installed with the factory hardware, just some wood screws essentially. They are rather good sized ones though, so there is that. You can see back here, it's hard to tell, but it sticks out just a little past that bulkhead. And we did wrap the spar right here with a wire that runs across from this elevator. They had the duct tape around it to hold the wire up to it. We also wrapped it with 2 layers of metal tape to help provide a heat barrier for that wire. Tail's glued on, and I've got the holes drilled for the turbine and the bland nuts installed for that. So right now what I'm doing is I'm setting up the fuel tank, and I was just looking at this. I think this is bigger than the version 1 fuel tank, and I think that the hookup, I think this is a totally different tank. I need to go back and look at the original, but I'm pretty sure it's a little bit bigger, and the location for the hookup is in a different spot. But anyways, I'm gonna go back and look at pictures. I might be totally off on that. It could be the exact same tank. But anyways, the hardware seems a little bit nicer on this tank. Like you see, I've added some safety wire to the hoses, so that way the hoses don't fall off. If those hoses fall off, you will run out of fuel as soon as you get down to this level here, so not a good thing. It's a pretty simple setup. Just got to install it in the tank. Remember not to over tighten this, as you'll crack the tank. So snug is good enough, and then basically you install this into the airplane with these thumb screws here, and then you use these large zip ties to strap it down to the frame. Pretty simple. And then once that's in, I can hook up the UAT and mount this in the plane, and then once that's done, we can mount the fuel pump and then run the rest of the lines once that's all in. But I gotta put the fuel tank in before the turbine, because that's the way the only way that the tank can go in is through this area here. So you see, it's a pretty big tank. I don't think it's quite 80 ounces like the ones in my T-38, but it's probably pretty close. It's a pretty good sized tank. So I got the turbine installed, the fuel tank is installed. It can't come any farther back than this bulkhead, because otherwise the hatch won't close. So the hatch kind of keeps it from sliding back, which is good. But anyways, it's strapped down to that tray, which you can see right here, held in place with those screws. And yeah, so obviously gotta hook all that up, trim it all up once it's ready to go. And then once I run the fuel lines from the pump back to the engine, I can set all those up, route them through the framework here. But that is pretty much it for the back of the airplane. So next up is going to be, I guess I'll just keep going with the fuselage. I'll set up the nose gear, get the fuselage installed, mount the UAT and all the turbine stuff, get all that stuff sorted out, and we'll go from there. Also, the instructions show the tank being mounted the other way, and I remember when I had my last one, I didn't like how the hoses came out because I felt like they had to make kind of a sharp turn to get down below this bulkhead. And having it, so you can see this one's sitting above it right now, so they'll be like this coming through that area. But I didn't like having the pressure on that while it was installed. So anyways, you see we got room for a secondary tank. If this ends up being a short flight, we can put a second tank in it, or a smoke tank. So and it won't be any problem being mounted like this. I mean, you increase the chances of a leak, I guess, but you don't leave fuel in these things when you store them, so you always pull the fuel out of them. So it's not like it's going to be sitting here for long periods of time with this submerged in fuel. So anyways, let's see if I can think of anything, other tips and stuff from what I just did here. Nothing too major. Yeah, I think we're ready to move forward in the fuselage. Okay, so for the forward fuselage, you got these two straps, which is all this hardware over here comes in a separate bag with those instructions. Then you have this hardware, which is the 5 other screws, which come with these cool aluminum grommets, and the rest of the screws are for the nose gears. So we're going to install these first around the bulkhead of the forward fuselage, and then we'll install the straps and then the nose gear. Okay, so I got the nose steering servo set up. Pretty simple, a couple of ball links. Just need to install it in the airplane now. So pretty sweet. Alright, I'm gonna stop there for the night. I got the nose gear installed. Fuel tank is installed. I got the UAT installed, hooked up, zip tied down. We got our fill line here. And this is a line that's gonna run to the pump. Gotta trim that down obviously, but you can see the UAT installed in here. So that's pretty much where we're going to stop for the night. Not too bad though. I mean, I don't know, 6 or 7 hours into it, maybe 6 hours, and most of the fuselage is done, minus mounting pump, receiver, the battery stuff, and then it's just what's left in the wings. So I think we'll stop there for the night. Alright guys, a few days have gone by, and we're back on the assembly here. Not the build, the assembly. So I'm working on the wings now. We finished up the fuselage, the last little part there. Right now I'm just working on where I'm going to put everything. I'm going to switch things up a little bit. I'm going to try and avoid putting nose weight in this one. I had 6 ounces in the last one, so just trying to figure out where to put everything. This is a pretty heavy pump, so I'm going to run that up front. And anyways, working on the wing. I got everything hinged for the most part. The way I did the flaps was, and again, before I did any of this, I checked the screws, make sure they were snug but not too tight, and then I put a little tiny drop of oil in all of them before I glued them in. But I glued them into the flap side first, and basically when you glue them in, I installed the flap just to hold the hinges in the proper orientation while they cured. So I just installed the little actuator horn, whatever you want to call that, attachment for the servo, and yep. So I gotta put the horn in this still, but yeah, that's all ready to go. Right now I just have the servo mocked up because I was trying to figure out exactly where to put, see how it comes out of the hole offset, and that's just a educated guess based on the position of the servo, which is not mounted yet. It's just sitting in there, but you have to offset this a little bit to get it in the proper orientation for the push rod. So, but essentially everything's going great. The instructions are super detailed and pretty easy to follow. So yeah, we're moving along, and I'm going to start installing the rest of the hardware, or all the hardware and stuff and antennas. This is a non-gyro receiver. This is out of the T38. So I don't have a synapse to put in this yet. So for now, we're just going to use a standard receiver. It's a 20 channel. It's power safe. So anyways, yeah, let's get this flap installed, and then we can work on push rods and servo installation here. And again, we're running the Spectrum A6380s. It's a standard size servo, lots of torque, pretty fast, pretty budget friendly. Comes with nice hardware. I'm going to end up using, I know some guys will use like the metal horns and stuff, which is, or arms, which is nice, but it does come with some decent plastic ones, which is what I'll be using. So I use plastic ones on my last one. This is not an ultra fast jet, so the loads aren't crazy high on the flight controls. So anywho, let's get back to assembly. Oh yeah, classic. So I'm on the next wing. So I got just finished up gluing the hinges in on this one and gluing the aileron horns in. The wing's all done on the right wing. I just need to do the multi-connector. Other than that, this wing's all set up, ready to go. I just finished running all of my fuel lines and wiring for the turbine. So it's all tucked up nicely along in the bulkheads here. So I got the GSU mounted, or I'm sorry, the ECU mounted, and the pumps mounted. So I need to get some Velcro for my batteries and stuff, but I'm really hoping that this thing ends up with no nose weight. So I got the fuel shutoff valve installed here, so that goes in between the geez, brain fart, goes in between the pickup tank. I don't know why I'm friggin' forgetting that. Anyways, it goes in there, you shut it off. This is a line that goes to the pump, so it'll be drawing fuel through here. The reason you put the cutoff valve here is so that way when you're fueling it, you don't potentially put pressure through the pump and cause issues. So you close this off before you put fuel in the airplane. So fuel, and then the filter is right here after the valve. So it comes the UAT. There we go. The UAT flows through here, through the filter, into the pump. The reason you put the filter before the pump is that way you don't get any particles into the pump from the fuel tank. So you don't want to damage the pump, and especially with this high pressure portion of the pump for the starting on this new G5 has a starting line and then a run line. So it's a very high pressure pump for the start. So you don't want to be damaging any of that pump mechanism with any particles. So my fuel system, my fuel pump jug is double filtered, so the only potential for getting anything into the pump would be contaminants in the tank. And that can happen by a couple different ways, but before I even hook up the fuel lines to the turbine, once everything is ready to go, I will run some fuel. I'll turn the pump on and run fuel through both lines, make sure they're fully cleaned out before I hook them to the motor. So but anyways, fuel system is essentially done. Just got to finish up that wing over there and do the radio install, kind of figure out where I'm going to put everything, and then yeah, radio setup and test run the turbine, and this thing will be ready to fly. All right, guys. Well, definitely jumped ahead on you guys. Most of you probably aren't going to watch this whole thing anyways. So I got the whole thing set up. It's bad lighting. I got the landing gear and turbine battery right here, two 3S 2200s, and then the two 2S 3000 Lifey packs. We got the pump and the controller for the turbine, obviously receiver. This is the box that controls the gear and the brakes. We got this is just kind of sitting in here. I don't have like a fuel plug-in thing anyways, but that's for the fill. You clean up some of these wires a little bit, but overall it's not too bad. The good news is that I was able to CG it without adding nose weight, so First couple of start attempts were a little on the hot side. When you set one of these up, you have to run the air out of the lines from the pump to the motor. So you turn the pump on and you pump the fuel into like an empty container. And I did that, but it only pumped the fuel for the running side of the turbine, like the main fuel line. It did not purge the start line. So I had to attempt to start it with a fully empty line. So I had to run fuel through. So the first start attempt was immediately shut down. As soon as it started to get fuel, it was already confused because it was pumping and pumping and pumping and there wasn't anything there. And then the fuel finally showed up. So it throws everything off. I think I had to do like 2 or 3 start attempts to get it to actually start. This is one of those new really fast starting motors, so it starts within like 10 seconds or something like that, and it's up to idle speed, so it spools up really fast and it uses that high pressure fuel to get it started. And there's a little bit of blue flame, which is a little disconcerting when I'm not used to seeing that. Usually just a little tiny bit comes out when these things start, and this one's, you know, shooting 3 or 4 inches of blue flame. It's not orange or red flame, which is when it's post turbine ignition, so it's igniting back here instead of in the combustion chamber, which that's really not good. That'll start fires and all kinds of stuff really quick. So the blue flame is normal, but on the very first start it shot a couple of flames out, and I didn't realize it until I've been sitting here burning for a couple of seconds that this little section right here actually caught on fire. So it's just like a little tiny flame just from a couple of little flames shooting out the back on the first start attempt. So anyways, it's running great now. Ran it up a number of times and did a few starts with it, and it seems to be all kosher. So anyways, not really a whole lot to report. I mean, I essentially built this per the manual. So manual is very detailed, like I said before. Really the only thing you're left to deal with is kind of like your turbine setup and stuff like that. So as far as the airplane goes, it's straight out of the box, and super stoked that I don't have to add any weight. But anyway, so we're gonna hopefully maiden this in the morning, and yeah, we'll see how that goes. But for now, hope you guys enjoyed this assembly video, and we'll see you in the next one.